Ellen Dower is a sister of Charity of St. Elizabeth, but she tells me they're popularly known as the Sisters of Charity of Convent Station, New Jersey. And Ellen is currently the executive director of the Religious Formation Conference. Prior to becoming executive director of RFC, Ellen was in leadership for 8 years, so she brings a wonderful experience from that perspective. And prior to that, she ministered in higher education. I have a great deal of gratitude for Ellen's friendship of NAVFD. We're thrilled you can be with us.
I'm going to begin by just a short kind of commercial about RFC. I know I'll be doing that later on, but you're a captive audience. So I'm going to just kind of begin with a little information about RFC. Then I'm going to begin with some assumptions and definitions so that we're all kind of on the same page. Then I'm going to go into, I'll try to make it as interesting as possible, but just a bit of theory that serves as a backdrop for formation, and you have everything on the papers, so you don't really need to write anything down. You just kind of stay as engaged as you want. I know it's also after lunch, so the room's a little warm, so that's a little tempting. Then I'd like to talk about initial and ongoing formation, and ongoing formation in particular, and then come with some conclusions. So if you fall asleep, there are just two things really that I want to say. One is that all of life is formation. All of life is formation. And secondly, I think we get ourselves all kinds of twisted and turned around what kinds of programs should we be having. Whereas if we take a broad look at it and say all of life is formation, I think it's really more, how do we look at the lens and the process that we use rather than multiplying programs. Okay, so that's kind of the bottom line. If you don't agree, go to the next one. So, okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about where I'm currently ministering. I work at the Religious Formation Conference, which is located in Chicago, which is about the same temperature as here, no spring. And we, our focus is just like this tripod. So we have a three-legged mission. And so those of you who remember your math, 3 points determine a plane, all right? So there's no such thing as a tripod that's ever out of balance. So, the tripod of our mission is initial formation, ongoing formation, and the professional preparation of formators. Now, of course, they're all related to each other. So we work with some people in initial formation, we work with all of our congregations in ongoing, and then we help to prepare formators. We have a variety of programs. The two really common ones that kind of are our signature, there's a signature dish, so this is a signature program. One of them is the Life Commitment Program, which helps to prepare people for final vows. We offer that every summer for about a week. Some people call it vow camp. And then we also offer Formation, the Formation program, which prepares formators, and it's a 2-year program, non-residential. So they go for a week 4 times over the course of 2 years. It's a wonderful program. Some of your members have been part of that. We also offer a shorter orientation called Orientation to Formation. It's a weekend, and we offer that every year, and it is for leaders, for formators, for vocation directors, different kinds of people. We offer a congress, just like you have a biennial conference, we have a biennial one too. And we have some publications, we offer a quarterly newsletter, and we also, very popular that we have our webinars. And our webinars are about every other month. And I'm going to be talking about it more at this next session, but we have a 3-part webinar coming up in May on psychological testing. And one's the basics, the second one is on what to do with difficult findings, and the third one is on intercultural issues around psychological testing. Our webinars are free. They're open to anyone, so you don't have to be an RFC member. They're free if you watch them at the time that they're recorded, that they're webcast. If you want to see the recordings, that has, I think it might be $25, and you can go and you can watch them. People show our webinars to mother houses, to retirement centers. It's a lot of ongoing formation, and then sometimes we do things on initial formation. We also offer consulting and anything else that comes up along the way. So those are our primary things. Okay, so that's kind of the commercial, the beginning part of where I'm ministering. This is my 3rd year. I never thought I'd be doing it, but we're all doing things that we never thought we'd be doing, right? And it keeps getting better, and I really enjoy it a lot. So I'm going to kind of transition now into more of the content, and so I have a beautiful slide there. Okay, we have this gorgeous slide, and it has this quote, live in the newness of life. And actually the picture is there. And pretend it's spring, right? That's what the earth is supposed to look like now, right? With the new green leaves and the azaleas there and the flowering tree. So live in the newness of life. So let's situate initial and ongoing formation in terms of the newness of life, the ever new life. The second quote that we have here is it's a little longer quote, but through him the whole structure is held together and grows into a temple sacred in the Lord. In him you also are being built together into a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. So I want to point out in that quote the tense of the verbs. Right, they're present tense. So through him, the whole structure is held together and grows. That's a key word there. Grows into a temple sacred to the Lord. In him, you also are being built up. We're all, right? We're all being built up individually, corporately in our communities, and larger in all of religious life. So we're being built up into a dwelling place for God in the Spirit. Okay, so let's kind of situate what we're going to be talking about through that all of us are in the process. So just as we heard yesterday that all of life is vocation, well, all of life is formation too, right? So there's no vacations, right? We're all here. So now I'm going to talk, so those were sacred scripture. Now I'm going to use 2 quotes from formation. One of them is something I hear a lot, and the other one is a quote that I got from someone else. Okay, so the first quote is, have you ever heard this? We don't have anyone in formation. Have you ever heard people say that? Yes. Does it drive you as nuts as it drives me? If you want to get my goat and see the ire in me, just say to me, we don't have anybody in formation. I'm like, how can you say you don't have anybody in formation? Really? Aren't you in formation? Aren't we all in formation? What are we, like statues? So we don't have anybody in formation. Now, to say we don't have anybody entering at this time is perfectly accurate, okay? Or, we don't have anybody currently in initial formation, but we don't have anybody in formation. Really? What an assumption. just think about, like, our words mean something, right? And our words reveal our thoughts. So what does that say about us if we say we don't have anybody in formation? Yeah, we're like stuck, we're dying, we're ending, we're not learning, we're not curious, all those kinds of things. So you too can attack the next person who tells you that. Oh, I get like so mad. Oh, it's not a pleasant scene. Okay, the other one, I need my glasses to read this. All right, so this was written, I just found this in a talk that a Carmelite was giving, and he was giving it at the end of his leadership time. So he says, back in 1980, when I entered religious life, ongoing formation was a fundamental element of our life. The provinces prepared courses, developed programs and materials. Gatherings were organized even at an international level. I would like to say it was a true boom. This interest in ongoing formation has slowly decreased. On one side, the lack of personnel in some provinces makes it difficult to organize these gatherings, as well as freeing people so that they can dedicate some time to formation is starting to be considered almost a luxury. Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever feel that, gee, I remember when I entered that there was a lot of ongoing formation? Do you ever feel like, gee, we used to do all these things. How come we don't do them anymore? Now, maybe you don't feel that way because maybe you do continue to do a lot of things. But I remember, so I entered in 78, and I remember, in the 80s and 90s, we had lots and lots of things going on. And so when I first read this, I thought, sometimes I think and sometimes I feel badly for the people who are after me, because sometimes I feel like they're not getting all the things that I got. I was offered so many things. It was you just grew and grew, with knowledge and background and all of that. And sometimes I think, oh, gee. But there are a couple of assumptions that are embedded in this, in what he has to say. So one thing that he's assuming is that ongoing formation is made up of programs, courses, what does he say? Programs, courses, gatherings, all of that. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, because I want to debate that as we go along. So I would assert that, as valid as his quote is, it's probably a narrow way of looking at ongoing formation. To restrict it to courses and programs and gatherings is probably not as broad as it could be. So we'll go back to that, because we have another quote from him. Okay. So then we're going to look at two very simple questions. So first is, what is ongoing formation, or what's formation, just kind of generally, what is it? And conversely, what is it not? Okay? And I think I'm going to get rid of these extra papers here so I can keep myself together. Okay, get back in the line of the camera. Okay, so formation, and I need my glasses because I'm of that age, So I think one of the most accurate ways of describing formation, and particularly ongoing formation, is that it's a continuous conversion of heart. I think that's the deepest way of talking about it, that it's a continuous, so it's ongoing, a continuous conversion of heart. It involves change and growth, okay, which is part of conversion. A synonym we could use is transformation, because to a certain extent, transformation, conversion, there's a lot of similarities. So it's a transformation of the person. It's a lifelong process, and it involves the whole person. Okay, so as persons, we are all multifaceted, right? We have lots of different sides to us: intellectual, spiritual, psychological, professional, community, etc., social. So it involves the whole person, not just, not just our spiritual part, not just our head. It involves the whole person. Okay, so then conversely, what is not formation? Okay, so one thing is that it's not really the same as education. Even if you use the word education broadly, even if you use that word broadly, formation is bigger and deeper than education. So it's not the same as education, especially used in the narrow sense, or like taking courses. It's a lot more than that. It doesn't have a time frame, so we're never finished, right? So it doesn't have a time frame, nor does it really have particular content. Now we can put, a variety of content in it, but it doesn't have, it's more than content, okay? It's process, it's an integration, etc. Okay, ongoing, I think this is one of the better ones. Ongoing formation is not meant to remediate initial formation. Okay, so you don't look at it and say, well, this went wrong in initial formation, or they didn't get this in the novitiate or whatever, so now we're going to fix it. Okay, so it's not meant as a remediation, nor is it a complement or an adaptation or a fulfillment of initial formation. So, you don't say, well, if you didn't get it then, you'll get it now. Okay, so, it's a lot bigger than that. And it doesn't really, and you might look at it this differently, but I'm not sure that that ongoing formation begins when initial formation ends. I think to use that whole thing about graduating, truly isn't all of life, isn't all of formation ongoing formation. With one piece of it at the beginning, an initial piece. So, we can set up whatever artificial boundaries or categories we want to use. But to a certain extent, it begins and it continues throughout all of life. So while we can make vows, in some groups, I think of the Daughters of Charity, they don't make vows at the end of novitiate, or they call it seminary. They make first, and they never take final vows. So they make a commitment, I think it's about 5 years after the completion of novitiate. So when do you say for them that they finished initial formation and went into ongoing formation? So we all have different kinds of structures. So let's look at some assumptions that are underneath what we're talking about. So all of us at one point or another gave an initial yes, an initial response. Okay, if you think about all the phases that it's gone through, right? All the times when you wanted to renege and change your mind, but more than that, all the times when it deepened and you saw things in a broader perspective. So that initial response of a person goes through lots of different phases and changes over time. It's clarified, it's strengthened, and most importantly, it matures. As we mature, our response matures, as we see more of life and see the interconnections. And it's a step-by-step, stage-by-stage kind of process, just as we go through life in different steps and stages. And sometimes it's one foot in front of the other, and other times we leap and bound, you know, depending upon where we are. And I really like this, this next quote that actually comes from an article from, and you know, one of the things I will send, I meant to put it on the last slide. I had quite a bibliography that I used for this, so it might help to share those sources. So this was a very interesting article on ongoing formation. And I put a couple of highlights in this when on my version. So I love this quote. So ongoing formation enables persons to live change in continuity and continuity amidst change. And that this is expressed in the word fidelity. So let's look at that. Let's just kind of think about that again. Ongoing formation enables persons to live change in continuity. Okay, think about all the changes we've been through in life. I know when I was young in our community, I would look at the people who entered before Vatican II, and I would think of all the changes that they had gone through. You know, they came with these trunks. They had these big, you know, and they put everything they had in. I mean, when I entered, I had a car full. You know, we had a station wagon. You know, I brought my stereo and, you know, all that kind of thing. So they came with a trunk, but they wore a habit for a long period of time. They changed their names. You know, they had a very strict novitiate. Their novitiate was, and maybe some of you people did too, I don't know. You know, their novitiate was very enclosed. They never really got out. They had superiors. So, like, you know, I've never had a superior. You know, I've never changed my name. I never wore a habit. I mean, any of those kinds of things. But I looked at the people ahead of me and I used to think, wow, look at all the changes that they've gone through. But there was a continuity. So there was change, but there was continuity. And likewise, you could look at, you know, the converse. There's continuity, you know, like we continue to be a sister of Providence or a sister of Charity or a sister of Mercy or whatever, and it has lots of changes. So I thought about a couple of examples. So the image that I had on there, I don't know if it's on your paper, but it's a leaf with all different kinds of colors. So it's still a leaf. You know, it's in different directions, it's different colors, but it's still a leaf. But I thought about, you know, we've all gone through, we've all lived in different places, we've all had different kinds of ministries. Our prayer has changed over the years. Our relationships, our friendships have deepened and broadened and changed. But then I also thought about, for some people, their mother houses have been sold. You know, and that's a huge change. But yet you remain in the community. You know, you're still a sister or brother or priest of whatever the particular congregation is. It doesn't change that continuity piece. So it's a major change. Provinces have been, you know, collapsed, ended, begun, whatever. So sometimes you're a member of one province, sometimes you're a member of another, sometimes you're a member of none. And likewise, congregations have merged. And people have, you know, have had to assume whole new sets of relationships and changes and structures and all of that. Those are huge changes, huge. But there's a continuity there. So there's change in continuity and continuity in change. And it's all expressed in that wonderful word, fidelity. Don't you love that? That's a deep, deep, rich word, fidelity. So with that inspiration, I think that's inspiring. Anyhow, hopefully you're getting a little inspired here. Let's look at a couple of theorists, a couple of people who have some things to say. You know, it's always kind of helpful to undergird what you're probably, you know, because I taught in college for a long time, but you know, it's always helpful to have a little theory behind what you're saying. It gives it a little, you know, structure and foundation. Okay, so the first two theorists, I have to confess, I have not heard of them before, but I read about them and I thought that they had some interesting things to say. The others are more commonly known psychologists. So this Paul Greiger, has anybody heard of him? Okay, good, we're on the same boat. Okay. Talks about a person is not a static being, well, we all know that, right? Whose abilities and strengths decline over time. Well, that's really hopeful, isn't it? All right? I don't know about you, but when I first began in religious life, I used to think that Monday, you started out the week like fresh, you know, and you had all this energy, and I used to think, because I have a background in math, so I used to think it just kind of steadily went like that, you know, as the week went along. At some point, I learned that in giving, you receive. You know, and I learned that it wasn't so linear, and that it's not just a constant decline, but there's an infusion as well, that in giving we receive. So we don't just have a certain amount of abilities that keep declining. Instead, you know, it's a dynamic process of increase and decrease and change. And that one's strengths, now certainly physical strength basically does decline over the years, but our psychological and spiritual strengths also grow over time. And there's a driving force within a person to become mature and responsible. It's great, you know, there is something in us that drives us to be mature and responsible. Now, some people have a superabundance of that, right? Do you know some people who are like super responsible and super mature, and then there are a few people who kind of miss the boat along the way. But on the whole, you know, this is the majority. On the whole, most people, there's a drive within us to mature. We want to mature. You know, you don't want to stay immature. And there's a drive to be responsible. And then he proposes what I thought was interesting, 4 stages of education and formation. Knowing how to do, knowing how to be, and knowing how to become. So let's kind of look at that a bit. So we can know something up here, right? You can know something. And if you know how to do something, well, you can apply it. All right, so as a former math teacher, you know, somebody can know about a quadratic equation, but you can apply it if you know how to factor it and solve it. Okay, and then if you know what it means. Knowing how to be is more of a in my look at it, is more of a combination of the head and the heart. So it's not just head knowledge, but it's head and the heart. And knowing how to become is like all of life. So if you look at it in terms of being a member of your congregation, you can know what it is to be, you can know what the charism of a congregation is, or you can know the history of a congregation. So that's knowing. Knowing how to do, you can know about the ministry. You could be an associate member, you know, and know about the ministry. You can know how to be. Do you remember when at some point in your life you realized that being a member of your congregation was your whole identity? Do you remember when that merged in you? And all of a sudden you realized, this is all of me. You know, this is not just like something I do on the side. You know, this is when it's subsumed into your identity. Okay, that's the knowing how to be. And knowing how to become is the ongoing formation. Okay, we keep growing into it. And for ongoing formation, it's really growing from the knowing to the knowing how to become. That's really the point. And it continues. The second person, and I have no idea how to pronounce this last name. Okay, Bissignon. I can only do a little French. I can't do Italian here. But anyhow, his theory, and he's a religious when he talks about this, is that, again, each of us is continually in the process of maturation. And that formation should not be restricted to just intensive periods. So it shouldn't be just a retreat or a course or a program. It should be bigger and broader than that. And that it should be integrally connected to the growth of a person and in all of its different ways. So he takes a look at professional growth, interpersonal growth, affective growth, and encourages it to grow in an integrated way. Okay, the next person I'm sure is more familiar to you, Erik Erikson. Okay, we all learned about Erik Erikson, and I think in general psychology in college at one point or another. All right, so Erik Erikson has this famous 8 stages of development, and each stage, and the first 3 or 4 are basically during childhood. That identity one takes place more during adolescence. Intimacy is more early adulthood. Generativity is more middle adulthood, and ego integration is later adulthood, basically, and we go in and out. And each of the stages has crises and tasks, etc. I remember learning in grad school about Carol Gilligan and her work with Erikson, and it made so much sense in terms of the fact that, like most psychology at that time, all the norms were done, with present company excluded, with white men and white college-age men. So the norms didn't apply to anybody who was not a white young man. So it didn't apply to women, it didn't apply to people of different cultures, etc. So Carol Gilligan found in her work that for women, the task of identity came really after the task of intimacy. That for women, through friendships, through primary love relationships, we come to find ourselves. That we find our identity primarily through those deep relationships in our lives. And so there are so basically there are different ways of looking at these different tasks. Another thing I think to look at with Erikson is that religious also need to develop a collective identity beyond their individual identity. As members of congregations, we need to look at the collective as well. Okay, the next person, the last of the people, is Carl Rogers. Again, I'm sure familiar to most of us. So I think Carl Rogers must be the ultimate optimist. Because he says that each person has the best internal potential and the call to realize it. So in other words, within each of us, we have that best self. All right? And every once in a while, you touch into it, don't you? Not too often, but every once in a while, you kind of touch into that best self. So we have that potential, and also the call to realize it. So it's not just a potential, but an ability to realize it. And that process is called self-actualization. And that we choose to do this. And that there's also, just as we heard with some of the other theories, there's also a formative tendency within each of us. Something that helps us to choose to grow, to choose to be mature, and to reject those things that are against growth. That we continuously move to be our real self as opposed to our false self, and that ongoing formation should help us to reach that potential within us and to be a full functioning person. So I had to tell you like a little story with self-actualization. So when I wanted to enter our congregation, I did the dreaded task of telling my parents, and I had just graduated from college. So my father said to me, "You will never be self-actualized." And you know, I knew what that meant. He was doing graduate school at the same time when I was in college. So anyhow, he said, "You will never be self-actualized. I see too many of those women, you know, and they're just unhappy in life, and they're not self-actualized, and all that." So of course I said, "Of course I will be. You know, of course I will be." And so anyhow, a year later, you know, I did enter, and they came around and all of that. But I always chuckle about that. I thought, I cannot be more self-actualized than, you know, I've had so many opportunities and, you know, and all of that. And it was like, how could he think that you wouldn't be self-actualized? It's like, you know, you just have so many opportunities to grow and to be. And so I thought, anyhow, that's our little joke. We never talk about it. You know, we're very Boston Irish Catholic. We just don't talk about it. So, anyhow, okay. I have no idea how I'm doing on time.
Another about 17 minutes.
17 minutes. Okay. Okay. So we better speed talk. Okay. So just to kind of sum up with the theory, basically, maturation is a lifelong process, lifelong experiences. And two of the key pieces to it are freedom, okay, our own inner sense of freedom, and openness. Okay, if we're not open, we're not going to grow. Okay, okay. I have a little piece there on transformational learning, and I don't know if you have the picture that I have, but it's a picture of two people with a 6, and one person's looking at it from one side and says 6, and the other person's on the other side and says 9. Okay. But anyhow, transformational learning is a deep kind of learning where your perspective changes, hence the 6 and the 9, and one's worldview changes. That's the kind of learning that we want to have happen in ongoing formation. Okay, not just an accumulation of facts and figures, you know, so you can win on Jeopardy, but that deep kind of transformational learning where our perspective changes. Do you ever remember learning something that changed your perspective? I remember in the 4th grade, our sister, you know, they would pull down those maps. You know, they'd pull down that map, and then she'd have that pointer, you know, which sometimes was a tool, you know, a little, you know. But anyhow, she pulled it down, and she showed us where Vietnam was. And, you know, she did, you know, because it was a little hard to find on the map. And she explained to us where Vietnam was, and she explained all about, you know, at that point, the war in Vietnam, and for the United States. And I remember thinking afterwards, I wish I never learned that. I remember being so sad. I was in the 4th grade. I was like 9, you know, and I remember having this just profound sadness, and I just wish I never knew that, because it changed the way I looked at the world. It was the end of naivete to a certain extent in that way. And for the longest time, I just kept thinking, I wish she never told us that. You know, but that's an example, I think, of transformational learning where it changes your world. In a deeper way, we can also talk about spiritual transformation. Beyond transformational learning, spiritual transformation, which is really the work of God within each of us. Conversion is another word for that. And it's and it's more than just like a couple of highs. You know, like you go on a really good retreat and then you go, oh, my life is going to be so different from now on. You know, it's more than just like some peaks in life. It's more of a consistent belief in that ever-present, abiding presence of God within us, where again, your perspective changes and you make different choices and you are a different person as a result. You restructure your life consciously or unconsciously. And so Bainham talks about the 4 phases that someone goes through in spiritual transformation. And I thought about, who's the young woman who talked on Sunday night? Rachel. So the first one is crisis. And didn't she talk about kind of questioning, you know? And she was kind of saying, so kind of where's God and where's not God and that sort of thing. And the second is resistance, that struggle. And she talked about that too, right? She talked about kind of saying, well, you know, I kind of want to follow this, but you know, I'm going to give up. And she talked, it was kind of like a tug of war, you know, kind of a back and forth. Followed by a surrender, kind of a letting go. And she talked about working in that shoe factory, I think a shoe factory or something. A what? A sock factory. Oh, you know, right part of the body, wrong. You know, right church, wrong pew. Okay, so she talked about working in that sock factory where she, you know, she had that surrender sort of thing. And then an integrity where life is reorganized. And hasn't life been reorganized for her? Okay, and we can all think about times in our lives when that has happened. Okay, so let's look at some different kinds of formation. So if you look at Vita Consecrata, it talks about 5 dimensions of formation. Spiritual, obviously, right? Human formation, you know, like we all develop as persons, as individuals, as well as fraternal. So I would call that personal and interpersonal, right? So we grow in our relationships, but we also grow within ourselves. Apostolic and missionary, depending upon where our ministries are, but we also grow ministerially. Okay, so we have lots of growth in that over the years because we're involved in ministry for, you know, nobody retires, right? So, our intellectual, you know, we grow to we can think in different ways, we can integrate in different ways. And then growth in our charism. I mean, hasn't your charism deepened in you over the years? From just learning about it to realizing how much it's woven into the fiber of your being. But you can also look at much more. You can also look at your own professional development. You can look at cultural development, physical development, etc. So there are lots of different ways of looking at formation. I have then a slide that says, but the Holy Spirit is our primary formator. Okay, the Holy Spirit. And then I had, which is so ironic when I now look at when we had that piece thing yesterday in terms of that, you know, the hand in the Sistine Chapel, and that it's the same hand that called Matthew. I thought that was so cool. Oh, I thought that was amazing. So I have that image there, and that ongoing formation is motivated, first of all, by the initiative of God. Okay, so it's God who calls each one of us at every moment and in the new circumstances, okay, that life ever knew. Okay, so now getting into some of the meat of it, now that we're just about at the end of our time. So we can talk about both initial and ongoing formation. So canon law describes perpetual profession as, I thought this was an interesting way, it describes it as a point of arrival and a point of departure. Okay, so that whole idea of graduating, and graduation can also be called commencement. All right, so it's a beginning and it's a completion. And canon law also calls for a continual deepening of formation. Continual deepening of formation. Initial formation, I would propose, it's the first stage of ongoing formation. Okay, so let's get rid of some of those artificial distinctions and look at it as the first stage of ongoing formation. It's a preparation for life. It should open us to a desire to continue to learn, continue to grow. It shouldn't cause us to say, I'm done. No more novitiate, no more formation, no more of those kinds of things. It should encourage us to want to learn and to be formed each day. I think one of the most important things it can do is to arouse a sense of curiosity, a desire to learn, a desire to continue to grow. And it should be seamless, truly seamless, as hence the title for this talk. I then have a quote by someone from UISG, a talk that was given at UISG. And I found it somewhat dismaying, but something I think that we're trying to do here. He says that our first formation is well organized. I think for a lot of us, it was kind of a well-oiled machine. You could question it a little, but you didn't get too far, generally. So it's well organized. But ongoing formation is still a diffuse term. Okay? It probably is. One wonders why religious life so far was not able to organize a concept of lifelong formation with a natural connection between initial and ongoing. But that's what we're trying to do here. And that's what we're encouraging all of us to do, is to try to have a natural connection between that first formation and the ongoing formation, so that we don't just say, what are we doing? What are we doing? Then we have in a document by Sickle Cell, just a beautiful, beautiful quote here, where it says, whereas initial formation is ordered, the goal of initial formation is to help someone have enough autonomy to be able to faithfully live the life. So it kind of sets the stage. Ongoing formation helps a person to integrate creativity with fidelity. What a beautiful way of saying that. Okay, we talked about that before, about that change in constancy and the constancy in change. And to integrate creativity with fidelity. So it's not just like putting one foot in front of the other and walking the life each day, but it's doing it creatively. It's living a life of being faithful with being creative. So ongoing formation. So these are some of the pieces that I'd like to really kind of drive home. Okay, that continuing formation, I want to encourage us not to look at it as sporadic, episodic. It's so much more than going to a program or taking a course, even a sabbatical. Now, I'm not saying that those aren't helpful. They are. I mean, we can all the life of the mind is certainly important, and we can all learn a lot. But it's important not to compartmentalize ongoing formation. So it's not like, well, gee, I went to this conference, check that off now. Okay, I've taken care of my ongoing formation for the next 3 months or whatever. All right, so it's much more than that. But we tend to think that. We tend to kind of think that way. Instead, we really want to think about continual growth and a deepening, a fullness, and I think that the other key word is integrate, an integrated way of looking at things. So it's not just like filling the head with information or helping people to become more informed. It's not about piling it all in here. It's about a deepening, carving out a deeper space, but an integrated way of doing that. And so therefore, then I talk about formation as being daily. So it's not like just you come here and it's all taken care of. That we're being formed each and every day by all the experiences that stir us and that shape us. It's not just, an occasion here or there. It's really all the ordinary times of life. But the key word, I think, there is attentive. Right? I remember a quote years and years ago, I think I read it when I was in high school, something about the fact that that we walk past miracles each day as children walk through a field of daisies. That we walk past miracles each day as children walk through a field of daisies. And so, we're formed daily in life. We have all kinds of opportunities. But the question is, how attentive are we to those? And besides it being daily, it's also perpetual. Okay, so that just as all the molecules in our world are continually vibrating and in perpetual motion, we are too. Okay, if we stop, that's it. If we stop breathing, if our heart stops, etc. So we're challenged for that perpetual, ongoing formation. So a couple of other quotes as I'll just try to, quickly wrap up here. So the focus of formation should not be to correct difficulties. Okay, it should not be remedial. It's not preparatory. Instead, it should be the continual renewal of the person. It should involve all of the person. So I would say the three key words that we would want to look at in terms of ongoing formation are integrated, reflection, and discernment. So we want to make sure that with each experience, so we have an abundance of experiences that help to form us each day. The question is, are we integrating them into who we are? Are we living reflective lives, reflecting on them? And are we living, as Pope Francis would say, lives of discernment? So discerning God's spirit, God's motion, God's movement, God's call in our lives with them. So the essentials for formation are an openness to learn, a freedom to change, and an integration. Okay, integrating them within us. So what is your role then as a formator and as a leader? Now, it doesn't mean don't offer any programs, can all the programs, etc. But I think the key role is not to have a multiplicity of programs, but really to encourage all people, to provide them with the tools and the opportunities to live a reflective life, to integrate the various experiences into our life, and to be open and free to learn. I think those personally are more important than offering book lists and all kinds of programs. And then when we do offer programs, how are we helping people to be open? How are we helping them to be free to respond? And how are we helping them to integrate what they're learning into and growing into their entire persons? I think I'm going to leave you with the rest. I also point out that ongoing formation is not just also for the person, but it's for the whole institute, and it's for all of religious life. So the more that we pay attention to ongoing formation in our own lives helps our entire congregations to continuously grow, and it helps all of religious life to grow. And I end with 2 quotes. One is from Sickle Cell. To follow Christ means that one must always be on the road, and one is always on one's guard against ossification. Isn't that a good one? And then from Timothy, this is why I am reminding you now to fan into a flame the gift of God that you possess. So to fan it into a flame. So I encourage you to reflect. There's much here. I encourage you to reflect, to see how it can fit or not fit, and to see how it could apply to what you offer in your congregations, and encourage that those kinds of attitudes of openness, freedom, and discernment and integration into your own communities. Okay, so thank you very much.